everyone, and welcome back to Ask a Coach with Ingomu. My name is Anjanette with Ingomu, and today I'm so excited to be speaking with leadership coach Anjanette Sullivan, who is here with me already. We're so excited that we're on the screen here. So we're going to be talking about forming teams, working together well, developing strengths and leadership skills. So Angie, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Hey, thank you, Al.
So let's just dive straight into our conversation here. So tell me a little bit about your background and what inspired you to become a coach.
So I have been in learning and development, well, it's learning and organizational development for about 24 years. And what that means is whenever there were some performance issues, I would come in, I would consult and assess if there was a skill deficiency or if there was some other type of deficiency that caused that performance issue. One of the things I was asked to do back in 2009, I believe, 2009, 2010, I was working for a utility company and they wanted me to come in and centralize a team. Well, one of the things that they asked me to do when I was centralizing this team was to determine, of course, what were the competencies for all of the roles, what were all of the roles that were needed, and then the competencies. And that was fine. Well, they were looking to get rid of some people because they said they were horrible trainers. And I said, wait. Yes, you may think that they're horrible trainers, but do you have the right people and the right roles doing the right things the right way? So as I identified what those competencies were, then what I actually found out was that some people were very competent in LMS administration because they had the technical skill set, but they had them as facilitators. So they didn't need to be those facilitators, of course. Move them into the LMS administrative role, move some people into the instructional design role. And those people really flourished because they were then in the right roles doing the right things. So I kind of stumbled into coaching that way. Then when I moved to Houston, I had the opportunity then to work with some folks. I was consulting for an oil and gas company, and it was after the oil spill. And one of the things that in the Gulf of Mexico back in, when was that? 2010 when that happened, but I think I came in 2011. One of the things that they wanted me to do was train on these new procedures, new guidance practices, and things of that nature. But they wanted it to be a data dump. And I said, but what is it that you're actually trying to accomplish? And they said, well, we want people to be able to read and interpret these documents and then apply them on the job. And I said, okay, but doing a data dump, has that worked for you in the past? And we wouldn't be here if it actually did work for you. So come on, and I was getting it out of them. So I said, look, let's try to do some things differently. Let's apply these things. Let's see how they can actually apply these. And I did it in a game format called Quizzopoly. So they would move around the board and all of this stuff, but it was based upon their ability to apply, read, interpret, and apply any of these procedures. So once I taught them how to do that, and they were like, well, yeah, that actually did work. And people's behaviors actually did change. And then at another company that I was consulting with and from, did some coaching there. And it was a team that was completely dysfunctional because of a manager. And the leader, the VP of HR, did not want to get rid of that manager. And I remember stating, hey, you know what the problem is. The manager doesn't have the skill sets. The manager was actually a person that was doing a lot of gossiping and very toxic. And I said, one or two things are going to happen. Either you're going to have to get rid of this manager, or you're going to have a lot of people who are going to exit stage left. And so which one do you want to do? So all of this I kind of fell into. And then when I got certified with Berkman, then it all became very clear. It was all about the teams and how teams work together effectively. How do we assess what the skill sets are? How do we make sure that we have the right people in the right jobs doing the right things? And I have been doing that probably now and just really focused on that now for the past 2 years.
Talking about, making good teams better. So from the assumption that you're a good team to begin with, how do you know, that you can do better? How do you discover that?
Ask the question. The very first thing that you do is you talk to your team and you find out, hey, what can we do better? Because and think about this. Shoot, I can't remember the name of the person who created the what do you call it? The BlackBerry. And remember, the BlackBerry was good. It was great for
I
texting. It
love
was
mine.
great, and it was great for emails. But things were evolving. The customer needs were evolving, and they just wanted to stay stuck. They didn't necessarily go back to the customer and say, "Hey, what is it that you're looking for?" Or really seek out that guidance. And maybe there were some people even within the company that were raising their hands and saying, "Hey, maybe we should consider X, Y, and Z." But it was this fixed mindset that we have right now, that's all that's working, and that we don't need to change anything. But always go back, and just like we do with our cars, just like we do with our air conditioners, get that tune up. And one of the ways that we can get a tune up with our teams is to just simply ask, what are we doing well? What can we do better? What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to continue doing? And what do we need to start doing? And ask those same things of your customers as well, whether they're internal or external. And people will tell you. And if you're afraid they won't tell you because of your status or whatever the case may be, then do an anonymous survey and people will tell you.
So that's an interesting point. Is this, people sort of have this annual meeting thing, everybody gets together and maybe you ask those questions, but how often should you really be doing that? Is this like a monthly thing, a quarterly thing, an annual thing? What's your
You should
advice?
always listen to your people every day.
Sure.
But I would say at the very least, every 6 months, just check in and see where you are. Because you can do the big brouhaha annually, but I'm not really concerned about all of the brouhaha. I'm really concerned about, hey, coming together, whether it's every 6 months or whether it's annually, and just say, look, we don't need the showboats. We don't need all of the presentations for all of the leaders or what have you. This is just us. What is it that we need to do differently? What do we need to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing? What are we doing well? And if you don't feel comfortable with telling me this, can we do this anonymously? And then let's start doing something about it.
So as you've gone through that exercise and you have the answers,
Mhm.
so and you really meaningfully want to make that change to your team, what are some of those first steps to take, the actual action steps to take to move that forward?
The very first thing that you have to do as a leader when you're working with your team is to be aware of your biases and be aware of some blind spots that you may have. Because one of the things that we often get in trouble doing is, yeah, we tried that, or no, that's not going to work, or yeah, that's a good idea, but. And when you do that, then you're shutting people down. And when you don't have this open mindset, what that often causes is you not to be able to move forward. So that very first thing is to have that open mindset, recognize your biases, because just because you don't like doing something a certain way doesn't mean that that's necessarily the right way to do it. This is the way that I want to do it. And then the very next thing that you do is come up with a plan. And when you're coming up with a plan, you're saying, here are the things that we're going to work on. These are our top priorities. Then also assess with your team, what are their strengths? And not you assessing by yourself, oh, I know that this person is really good in that, and this person is very interested in that. I can be very good in a whole heck of a lot of things, which I am, by the way. Okay.
No surprise.
I actually am. I'm good at a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that I enjoy all of those things. So where there's an opportunity with your team, if they have an interest in these things, come up with this matrix and say, based upon these things, here are the skills that are going to be needed. Here are the interests that are going to be needed. Where are your strengths, and plug and play those people, but allow them to have that input as well. And then you can start to move forward. You know who's working on what when.
So how do you get, I mean, you can have small teams, you can have, insanely large teams. How do you get everyone on board?
One of the things that I have done, and it has always worked with me, regardless of the size of the team, is I've done a team contract. And with that team contract, and it doesn't matter if it's a new person that's on your team that joins your team, if it's a project team, if it's a team just, for a short period of time, or, for perpetuity, whatever the case is, you get together and the very first thing that you talk about is your values, but you want to make those values real. And you ask people, what does it look like when we're communicating effectively? What does it look like when we're collaborating effectively? And what does it look like when we're showing one another respect? If you can answer those three things, and not people saying, well, don't do, don't do is not a behavior that we can see. Tell me the behaviors that you want to see. And one of the things that someone shared with me one time before, when I was talking about this with my team, she said, ask me about my family because I'm so much more than this job. And I was like,
Mm.
ask you about your family? Well, I don't care about your family. We're here to do a job. And that was what was in my head. But what she taught me then, because that was some mess that I've learned years ago in my past, that people are just there to do a job. But what she taught me right then and there was, we come to the table as our whole selves. We are much more than just worker bees. And so I did learn to ask about her family. And because I learned to ask about her family, I ended up adopting those people as my family when I moved to Houston. I love them, love them. But she knew that I cared and it was authentic, but it also allowed me to grow and then show how I could care for others in the future.
It's a very interesting point you make, is as we at Angomo here speak with the clients we work with, the corporations we work with, the feedback we get a lot from the employees as to why do you want to use this is mainly it's the biggest piece of feedback really is because we want to see that our employer cares.
Yes.
So they care about all that personal stuff. So I want to jump back a little bit on your previous comment about the service and so on and feedback. We got a question coming here from somebody watching the show. So some people do, as you mentioned, have maybe a little bit of fear of reprisal and so on if they give feedback. So if you're bringing somebody in externally to do that, potentially a consultant or so on, so what are some of the values you think a good consultant can bring to improve a team's performance? Sorry. Does that make sense?
What values, what are some of the values that a good consultant can
So
bring
yeah,
to,
to improve a team performance.
oh, to improve a team performance? Oh, now one of those things that a good consultant can do is always to listen. Don't come in assuming that you know the answer to everything, but really listening to all of those people that are there at the table. And that's not just with the consultant, that's with the leader as well. And because one of my biggest values and greatest values is inclusion. And I know we've been hearing a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but inclusion for me is allowing everybody at the table to have a voice. I don't care what your title is. So when you're coming to the table, I always think of myself with the team as is it King Authors Roundtable? And I don't think I'm a king. I don't think I'm a monarch by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a round table. Everybody is equal at that table, and everybody has an opportunity to have a voice. So when you're allowing everybody to have a voice, regardless of what that is, then at that time, people do feel valued. People will offer up, hey, this is how we can do things, and this is how we can do things differently. And when you feel like you're valued and you care, you will give more of yourself. So that was a really good question. um what was the other thing that I wanted to say? If you're coming to the table as a consultant as well, because we've talked about the open mindset, not making assumptions. Oh, well, it is the assumptions. Also be aware of any biases that you could be projecting onto people, because sometimes what we do is we make an assumption. We see somebody, and based upon whatever experiences that we have, and we may see somebody who has, I don't, oh, this is a good one. See somebody that may be of a certain nationality, and because of whatever your experience may be with that person of a certain nationality, whatever it was, you may make assumptions that this particular person is that exact same way. And I'll give you a good example. There was somebody who was Indian, who from India, who I remember was raising his voice at me and screaming and all of this other kind of stuff. And then when I came into another instance with someone and I was consulting and coaching with this person, I was like, this is going to be a bad situation. They're going to think just because I'm a female, I don't know anything. And it wasn't that situation at all. And I had to check myself and realize that I was about to project something onto somebody that was not their reality at all. So thanks for that question.
Those biases can be a challenge, and
Yes,
I think
they
we all go
absolutely
through
can
those.
be. And we're not aware of them all the time. But when
Isn't that what they call
aware of them,
unconscious bias?
yeah, well, that's right. It's unconscious. But one of the things that I have, and I'm really excited about, and I would recommend that all leaders do this, always get an accountability partner, and always try to get somebody who is going to tell you the truth and who's going to challenge you, whether you want to hear it or not. And I have tons of friends who will challenge me, and I may get upset for a day, I may get upset for a couple of hours, but then I think about it and I realize, yep, they're absolutely right. And this is what I can do differently for my team.
I must admit that as a 21-year-old, nobody could tell me anything. As a 55-year-old, is please share. So,
Well,
go,
one of
go
the
ahead.
things that happened with me, and I'm really excited about this. My mother used to call me weird. She didn't know what was wrong with me. I wouldn't always play with the kids. Sometimes I would play with kids my own age, but I would always hang out with my neighbor as well. And she was in her 60s. I love to hear stories from people.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what your age is, doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are or are not, and doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, race, gender expression, none of that. I can learn from anybody, and I'm glad of that because of how I was raised. Although it would seem to be very weird initially, it has made me into the person that I am right now.
I can so relate to that. I was that weird kid as well. So something you alluded to a little bit earlier here. So what if you have a team and you really want to do the right thing and you really want to move, improve that team performance, but you have that boss who just doesn't get it, doesn't want to play along, or maybe isn't as competent as you hope them to be. What do you do?
So I'm glad you used the word competent because there are two types of competence. There is a consciously competent person and there is an unconsciously competent person. Consciously competent person is a person who is aware that they don't know what they don't know, which is a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Well, sometimes it's a good thing. It just depends on the individual. An unconsciously competent person, they don't know what they don't know. And typically that is a bad thing. And it really depends on that person's ego. So both of those situations can either be okay or it can go awry, depending on, again, on that person's ego. But what you do to navigate those situations is make sure that you're always preserving a person's dignity. Don't make a fool of a person and trying to make a point in front of a bunch of people. But what you want to do is bring a person to the side and speak to them in private. And when you're speaking to them in private, share with them, hey, have you considered, not that's not the right way to do this, blah blah blah, but just say, in my experience, I've done blah 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 blah, but have you considered this? Could this potentially work here? Or things of that nature. The other thing that you can do with them is also talk with members of your team. And when you're sharing with members of your team, say, hey, there's this one particular project or process that I'm considering. and just want your thoughts. And, let's do some brainstorming here. Here's some pros and cons. And I want to share this with whomever so that they can make the decision. And then when you're sharing with that person in private, hey, here's something that the team was considering and just wanted to share with you. Here are some options, and you can make whatever recommendation that you need to make, but you're going to make an informed decision based upon these options. And here are the risks. Here are some potential mitigations for these risks. And then this person will recognize that, hey, you're there to help them, not there to make a fool of them. And typically they get on board. Now, if it's a person that has an ego that's just in the way, and regardless of what you try, and even if you're trying to work with some of their peers that can help them also see some things differently, and they're still not learning, then sometimes you just have to let them fail. Just take your hands off them and let them fail, because sometimes that's the only way that people will learn, by allowing them to fail. But give them a chance first and assume innocence.
That's great. And you've talked about this in your, in Gomo coaching community. And there have been some really fun and spirited conversations there. I've been part of them. Well, what are some of the red flag behaviors that you see of an individual, or an individual team member, that can really cause harm to a team, can break down a team, and how do you overcome those?
Oh gosh,
How much time do we have?
Yeah, no, there are several. Some of the red flag behaviors is when someone is always pointing fingers, and I've seen this, and I call it the smoke and mirrors. If someone's pointing fingers at this person's doing that wrong, this person's doing that wrong, this person's doing that wrong, but what happens oftentimes is that's deflecting from that person. You're so focused on looking at these other people and not necessarily looking at that individual. And one of the things that you would do in that case is say, you know what, I really thank you for bringing this to my attention. And now the bubble over your head may be, look, tattletale, you need to stop all of this. But what you tell them is, I really appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I'll take care of that. But hey, where are you on doing X, Y, and Z? And just check back in with them and making sure that they're doing what they need to do. Another thing that you need to also look at is if a person is just not getting stuff done. So when people aren't getting stuff done, when people are pointing fingers at people, when people aren't owning mistakes, because it's always somebody else's fault, or yes, but, and yeah, but or they have excuses for everything. Those are the big red flags that somebody's not getting things done. But you always hold them accountable, always stick to the facts. Don't worry about saying, hey, you know what, why are you worried about blah, 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 blah. Just say, hey, I assigned you with this task, or during this situation, you were supposed to do blah, blah, blah. Your actions were this, and then the result was this. Either something wasn't done or what have you. Now, how are we going to do things differently? Always focus on the facts. Don't focus on the individual. And when you're focusing on the facts and the situation and the actions that they took and the results that you did or did not get out of that, then that brings people back into check a lot of times.
So part of being on a team also requires trust. That's such a big essential piece of that. So how do you build trust among your team, among your different members on your team?
The very first thing is be authentic. And one of the things that you will hear from me, and you'll also see from me, is what you see is what you get. And the people who've worked on my teams before have always said, what you see from Anji is really what you get. So be authentic, bring your authentic self to work, be consistent with whatever it is. If you're, now, I'm not saying that people can't have a bad day, but if you're consistently positive, just be a positive person. And if you're not a positive person, don't fake the funk, just be who you are, but also be very vulnerable. Be willing to share that, yeah, I made this mistake. Yep, this was me. I did it. I caused whatever this is. And people will have a heck of a lot more respect for you when you own up to your mistakes or if you own up to not knowing something and just needing the help. The other thing that I will share that will build trust is conversations. I always say that conversations prevent consternation. A lot of times we conjure up in our head what how bad things can go and how things can go awry, but when you typically have those conversations in real time, when you're focused on the facts and you're focused on the actions and the results versus focusing on people and thinking that someone has done something to you, those conversations actually go a lot better than what you anticipate. We just oftentimes conjure up stuff like that. But communication, the vulnerability, the consistency, and the authenticity, those things are what will always build that trust.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with someone yesterday who just a minor thing, and it was built up in this person's head to where it became a really big bad thing. And I just couldn't comprehend why it was such a bad thing. It's just like, so you had to have a conversation about it, and it wasn't. So you had to like bring the the self doubt, all that talk down a little bit, and it was just having an open conversation with this person. So it's I thought that was a great thing, and so you build trust, being able to listen and being able to understand and so on. So it's important. So what are some of the tools, resources, exercises that you can recommend for for building and leading a team?
So there are two big tools or two major tools that I've used. One is called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and that is a book by Patrick Lencioni. I think that's how he pronounces his name. And that is just a really great book. And he has an assessment that goes along with that. And in that book, it talks about the foundation of all teams is making sure that there's trust. Then it talks about the conflict or the fear of conflict. And if you're taking this assessment, you'll see where there's a breakdown. If there's a lack of trust, if there's a fear of conflict, if there is an inattention to results, if there's not a commitment, or if there's a lack of accountability. And taking that assessment can really help with that and just focusing in on those different areas. Then also, because I am Berkman certified and I love all things Berkman, there are a lot of other assessments that are out there. But one of the things that I love about Berkman is if your team can take this as a team, is it not only looks at those things that motivate you, but it looks at your usual behaviors, your stress behaviors, and what your needs are. And one of the things that a lot of other assessments don't do is really focus on those needs, because we can see people's stress behaviors, we can see their usual behaviors when things are going really, really well. But what we cannot see that's under the surface is those needs. And we have to talk to people just like you were talking about with that person had things just really built up. um, Figure out what those needs are that are not being met, that's causing a stress behavior, or figure out how to make sure you're meeting those needs that's going to cause these usually strong behaviors or strengths in a person. But those are two of the tools that I would absolutely recommend using.
Perfect. So you're one of our amazing Ingomu coaches. And so tell me, which I've benefited from when I've been to your sessions. So tell me a little bit about your coaching community here at Ingomu, how to make good teams better.
So that it really what I've been doing with that is I've been using a lot of case studies. So as I've talked to friends, things that I've worked with at different companies where I've been consulting, I've been looking at what's been working, what's not working, and then just giving that feedback as to how to make those good teams better. And I always start off with make sure that you have the right person with the right skills in the right jobs doing the right things. And by making sure that you have the right person, you're looking at that competencies. You're looking at, hey, what role do I actually have? What do they need to be able to do today? And what do they need to be able to do in the future? And so the right person with the right skills doing the right things, and you need to clearly define what those right things are. And those right things are not just hey, what we're doing today, but how are we going to look in a few months, and how are we going to look in a year? And then again, always coming back to reassess, are those things still right for what we're doing? Are they still aligned with the company's goals and objectives, or things of that nature? And this is not just something with corporate America, but you can also do this whether it's with churches, whether it's with nonprofits, any of these things where teams are working together toward a vision and getting this stuff done. And so I'm always giving you tools and tips as to how to communicate, how to identify your own biases, what to do when somebody is being disruptive, how to get everybody on board, how to work with that leader when that leader is not on board. Is all things 360 degrees teams.
And I've used some of the stuff I've learned in your sessions on the nonprofit side on being on a board.
Yes.
So that's, and so it's not just work. There's so many different angles to that. So Angie, what's the most important lesson you've learned from being a coach?
Oh gosh, it's one of these. Oh shoot, it's three things. I guess the first thing is not to make assumptions. Um, Whenever you're listening to people, you're seeking first to understand and then to be understood. So don't make assumptions. Just listen and really listen to what a person may be saying. Also, remember that whenever you're working with people, people have different experiences from you. So people were born and raised differently, and they are raised in different parts of the country or different countries, or what have you. So people are not going to always see things the way that you see things. And also, just conversations prevent consternation. If you don't know, ask, and don't assume that you know. And oh shoot, then there's a fourth one. You said one, but I'm giving you all four. Assume innocence.
But wait, there's more.
Well, my friends always know that every time I say, "Oh, that's it," I always come up with something else. But always assume innocence, because a lot of times we're making these assumptions that something is about us. It really has nothing to do with us. It may have something to do with somebody's past, because we do according to our learning, and we do according to how we were raised. And as my Aunt Sarah always said, we live what we learn. So just assume that innocence.
Perfect. So what's one of my favorite questions? So what's the one thing you always want to talk about, you always want to write about, in an interview or so, but nobody's ever asked you?
If people would ask me what I value the most, and a lot of people don't ask me what I value the most, but that is transparency and that is inclusion. And one of the things that people will hear me say is, just let people be. And if you would just let people be, I'm not saying allow people to get away with stuff. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination, but recognize that everybody comes to the table with different personalities, just different experiences, and just allow people just to be themselves. And if we were to do that, I think this world would be such a greater place with a lot less turmoil. But what happens, we're always trying to project our thoughts and our feelings and our whatever onto other people. And that's what causes all the consternation and the turmoil and the anxiety and everything else. Leave people alone and just let them be.
I want to say amen to that. So
Well, and that's what most people say. And it's funny that you say that, because even I was talking to a friend of mine not too long ago, and I told her, I said, if I were not already a Christian, unfortunately, because of how I've been treated in some churches, I would not want to have anything to do with Christianity. And it's not the Christianity is the problem. It's the people who were projecting their stuff onto other people, and they were treating other people certain ways. And I was a victim of some of that too. But I realize it's people. And so I am just a firm believer in just letting people be. And if people would just ask me, what do you value? Let people be.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that, Angie. So as a reminder, you are watching or listening later on to Ask a Coach with Ingomu. And my name is Wynan, and today I'm speaking with Coach Anjanette Sullivan, who I call Angie because she
Yes.
allowed me to do that. So,
Yes, you do.
so as we close today's conversations, I'd love to go to our 10 questions
Okay.
section, our rapid fire style
Okay.
here. So I'm just going to shoot us off here. Angie, so what's the best advice you've ever received and why?
My mother always told me, don't start off with anything you're not going to end with. And it's a very true statement. Don't act as if you like to cook all the time when you know good and well you don't like to cook all the time, or don't act as if you like to do whatever it is that you may do. And that's in your personal life, and that's in your work life. Just be who you are, and instead of trying to impress other people. So if you're who you are, then a lot of times what happens is you have very less stress in your life. But when you start to be something that other people think you should be, that's when you're inviting all of this anxiety and stress in your life that you shouldn't have. So just don't start off with anything you're not going to end with.
So
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Props to Cynthia Hicks.
So, who's been the most important professional mentor?
Oh
Your
my
most
gosh.
important professional mentor.
I've had so many of them over the years, and it started off with my first learning and organizational development manager. Her name was Amy Bullock, because Amy Bullock was always about finding those diamonds in the rough, and it was Amy Bullock. It was Kay Williamson. It was Gary Kessling. It was Renee Hansen. It was Bob Moeller. So all of these, Kevin Henry, all of these people believed in allowing people to just be, but they found diamonds in the rough, and they helped to polish those diamonds to make sure that they could shine as bright as they possibly could be. And they would allow them to shine, whether it was in their organization or they would encourage them to shine elsewhere. And so that's something that I always wanted to do, is to find those diamonds in the rough and help them to shine as brightly as they possibly could.
I love it. So, what's the one piece of advice you could share with our audience to uplift them?
Wherever you are today is not where you were yesterday. So always compete with yourself. Don't compete with anybody else. Don't worry about that. That brings anxiety. But if you're at a different place today than you were yesterday, then you're successful. And always strive to be a little bit further every single day, and just always compete with yourself.
What's the one thing you can do today to make a difference? Move
Absolutely.
forward. So, what's your favorite book or podcast, and how does it inspire you?
So my favorite book is called Never Go Back by Henry Cloud. And what he teaches is to really observe people, and well, not just observe people, observe situations. And it can be relationships, it can be your jobs, it can be what have you. But if it's what's the saying? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And that's what is talking about not doing. And making sure that you're looking at something, and once you observe this pattern, then either you need to get off the bus, or you need to move a different direction, whatever that is. And he teaches you how to not get sucked back into whatever that bad behavior was. And so it's just really been good for me, because there are a lot of times that I've had people trying to uh, dictate, I guess, is advise. That's the right word. Always trying to advise what I should and should not be doing, but it's my life that I'm living, and it's not their lives. And because I now have healthy boundaries, I don't have to worry about what they do. I don't have to get sucked back into that. I continue to move forward. So shout out to Henry Cloud.
Lots of shout outs here. Somebody posted in chat, I'll let Mama know you gave her some credit.
I will absolutely do that.
So, what do you do to relax?
Oh my gosh, I watch cartoons. I I
Which ones?
walk. Yeah, I love cartoons, and they have to be old cartoons. So things like Johnny Quest, the Flintstones. Well, I do watch Justice League Unlimited, but it can be action stuff. It's just fun stuff. But I will also do things, whether it is taking the swimming lessons, whether it's walking. So I love anything outdoors, but just things that are mindless or that just have me working and walking. But the other thing that I like to do is learn more about myself. So if there are opportunities for me to take different assessments to learn more about myself, I will do that. Just anything to figure out how my brain works, because I always like the why behind things.
So, if you weren't a coach, what would your occupation be?
Probably working for Berkman themselves and being a consultant for them. I just love that assessment. Um, yeah, I the founder of that, I mean, I know he's no longer alive. Man, if I could talk to him and figure out how his brain works, I would just be in heaven.
If you won $10 million today or tomorrow, what would you spend it on?
Let's see. Well, the very first thing I would do is I would pay off my house, and then the next thing that I would do is I would set up a foundation or a nonprofit, for elderly as well as anyone who may be mentally disabled. Well, families working with their elderly or mentally disabled, because sometimes working through different systems, it's hard to get people where they need to be and figuring out all of that information. And then the last thing that I would do is I would set up some type of a foundation for high school kids who would just want to figure out what it is that they want to do. So one of the things I would do is have them take a Berkman assessment. I love Berkman, I told you, and it's because it's figuring out the careers, but then giving them an opportunity to work in those different careers and not always going to, whether it's someplace in the mall or going to um, what do you call them? Fast food restaurants or something like that, but working in those different areas and seeing if that is something that they actually would like to work in.
So, what's the one thing you do every day that adds to your success?
Challenge myself, and not worry about anybody else. And then I always ask myself, hey, if what I'm doing right now is that is that really helping my vision, or is that aligned with my vision, or is that out of my vision? And if that has nothing to do with the alignment of my vision and my purpose,
Hmm.
then I stop doing it.
So, what technology project can't you live without, or technology product can't you live without?
Project or product. um oh gosh, I never thought I would be saying this years ago, because I was like, I don't need a
Your,
smartphone because
your
I'm a white
BlackBerry?
BlackBerry person. But the smartphone, but then when I think about it also, and it's a little more basic than even the smartphone. If we did not have the internet,
Hmm.
I just couldn't function. I couldn't do my job. I couldn't do what I'm doing with you right now. I couldn't communicate with a lot of people, a lot of different audiences. So I guess brass tacks, it would be the internet.
The internet. So, and last but not least, please finish this statement. Leadership is.
Leadership is finding those diamonds in the rough and shining them to make them as bright as they possibly can be, and in teaching them how to find other diamonds in the rough, and shining those and polishing those so that they can be as bright and shiny as possible.
Wow, that's beautiful. Angie, thank you for sharing with us today. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed our conversation.
Hey, thank you, Al.
So, how can people best connect with you?
Well, right now they can best connect with me through LinkedIn. Eventually, I'll have my website up because I'm redoing that, and my Instagram. But right now, the best way to connect with me is LinkedIn.
And I have that right on the bottom of the screen here. And if you're listening to that, it's linkedin.com/in/Anjanette dash Sullivan. So Anjanette dash Sullivan. So connect with Angie there. So thank you, Angie, again for being here today. I really appreciate it, and thank everyone for watching and listening in the future here. And I do want to invite you to our December 8th Be More Days. It's our virtual conference that starts at 8 a.m. Pacific time. It's a couple of hours, and we'll be having conversations about how to accomplish your goals in the new year around life, soul, wellness, and work. And Angie will be part of this, if I have that right.
Yes.
So there also will be a coach job fair and a networking event. So hopefully you can make it to that. It's going to be a great event. You can find more information. It is virtual, but you can find more information at bemoredays.com, and you can sign up there. It is free. It's just a great day of hanging together. So we will see you next Monday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time with guest Mo Field. And we're going to have a conversation about approaching new approaches to problem solving. So thank you, everyone, for being here. You can learn more about Ingomu at ingomu.com. But thank you for being here today. It was a pleasure seeing you. Make it a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next Monday.
Thank you.